Peter Credlin, live from News24.
Well, what do you expect when the Prime Minister makes such a goose of himself on social media? Good evening, welcome to the program. Here's what's coming up tonight on Credlin. The housing debate hots up. The coalition finally today putting some sort of number on net migration. But is it official policy? I'll put that to the opposition leader Angus Taylor, who joins me live a little later. Plus, still with the coalition, the News24 Pulse poll has the opposition primary vote closing in now on both One Nation and the government as Angus Taylor starts the climb back from the catastrophic wreckage of Susan Lee's time as leader. More on that with Tom Connell. Plus, reports tonight ASIO will get secret powers to investigate university research ties with hostile nations. And we'll look at more furore over Australia's de-radicalisation programs. And Angus Taylor today going hard on the Prime Minister over his crude treatment of the Japanese PM as Albanese digs in and refuses to apologise.
Why won't the Prime Minister stop treating us like fools, man up and say sorry to the Prime Minister of Japan?
We will stay with that issue because is it any wonder that people have lost faith in politicians when our Prime Minister is a purveyor of smut and repeatedly appears to have what can only be described as a pathological aversion to the truth? It's one thing to make a mistake, quite another to refuse to admit it, and character eroding to double down and then insist you did nothing wrong. But that's the MO, the modus operandi of Anthony Albanese. And he is shameless. Whether it's falling off a stage and then denying what was clearly caught on camera.
Stepped off the stage, I didn't fall over on my backside. I stumbled, that's what happened.
Or reneging on election commitments to cut household power bills.
Reducing power prices by $275. $275 a year.
Or that promise made some 50 times plus by his own reckoning not to touch taxes on investments.
Can you rule out any changes to negative gearing and capital gains tax?
Yes. How hard is it for the 50th time?
The Prime Minister's pattern of deceit, well, it now defines him. And that's deadly, particularly when facing off against the likes of Pauline Hanson, who is nothing but a straight shooter, even where her candour costs her votes.
I think it's disgusting that the Prime Minister can't even admit whether he got 2 melons, and this is the way he goes about this on air. I think it's disgusting. We know what the hell he was talking about.
I was in the House of Representatives that day when Julia Gillard came in like a galleon with sails full and cannons ready, as Tony Abbott stood at the dispatch box and demanded that she sack Peter Slipper, her turncoat speaker, for highly derogatory comments that Slipper had made about female genitalia published in the media that morning. But because the removal of Slipper could have sent her hung parliament to the polls, Gillard defended the indefensible, deploying that now infamous misogyny speech to save her own political skin at the expense of women and girls. Now, can you imagine the outrage if Abbott had made hand gestures about melons and a female politician, rather than merely, as he did, look at his watch? Or Scott Morrison, or Peter Dutton. Not only was Albanese's mocking of a generous ceremonial gift from his Japanese counterpart ill-judged, given the concern that Tokyo already has about his closeness to Beijing, but to use clearly sexual innuendo to garner social media likes at the expense of our allies' first ever female leader was crass beyond belief. When was the last time that the member for Grayndler stood on a stage to give a sober economic speech, as opposed to courting influencers with vacuous questions to even more vacuous answers to even more vacuous questions?
Delulu.
I dare you to drop that in the speech.
Do that? Delulu with no Salulu.
Oh,
We've got budget week next week. Listen up.
Tom, this is very surreal. Oh my God.
Cheers, babes, and welcome to Happy Hour with Lucy, Nikki, and the Prime Minister.
I mean, who's running the media strategy in his office? Or any of these Labor officers anyway? So enamoured are they with TikTok sound bites and trending reels?
They are delulu, Mr Speaker.
Well, Labor's delulu if they think drivel like this goes down well with everyday Australians at a time when their house values are tanking, crime's spiking, and people are worried about whether they can cover their power bills. It's indulgent. It cheapens the high office that he occupies. He doesn't own it. He just occupies it. Not that Albanese or his team appreciate that subtle but critical difference. What staggers me is the gaslighting. He insults our intelligence, pretending that in a discussion about melons and Pamela Anderson, whilst juggling his chest, hands in front of his chest, as if it's anything other than what we know it was.
The Japanese Prime Minister brought a melon.
Did she smuggle it?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm expecting.
Got a couple of melons.
She brought two.
She brought two, as you do.
Pamela Anderson, melons. I mean, this is straight out of the Daniel Andrews playbook. You know, try and tell people that what they saw it as black. Nah, it's white. That what he did, he didn't do, or what he said, he didn't say. I mean, give me a contrite Peter Beattie any time. Give me any politician ready to say sorry when they make a mistake, rather than one like this that treats us with such contempt. And speaking of contempt, I don't know who deserves the opprobrium more, Mr. Alba Sleazy or his handbag hit squad of mean girls as they raced out to defend what, if said by anyone else, would have been worse than a war crime. Just like none of them seem to have watched the degrading so-called skit involving the mining billionaire Gina Rinehart, saying that it was a matter for the ABC, that they could not comment on the content. What was it about the conservative politics of Sano Takahashi that meant she was denied the ritual defence so readily granted to women on the left? How galling it must be for these Labor women. I mean, they're used as Sheila shields for Albanese, but how weak of them to go along with it. In my day, women politicians told to get out there and defend the indefensible would have told the person at the end of the phone to get stuffed. But not these women of modern Labor, quick to lecture all of us about a kinder, gentler parliament, quick to lecture about the need for quotas to give women a fair go, and yet so quick to traduce themselves to be little more than patsies for a crass man who's diminishing faster than even his critics would believe.
The Prime Minister's been very clear that the type of inference that you're applying there is not what he was.
What we have heard from the Japanese side of this is there has been a sensationalised reporting of something that, as the Prime Minister's been very clear about, has been mischaracterised.
The comments and the remarks from the Prime Minister have been misinterpreted. The Prime Minister is very clear that he did not mean for those comments to be interpreted in the way they have by some media outlets and by our political opponents.
Come on, girls. We all see you. But no one should be surprised by that. Look at the track record of these women and their treatment of Liberals like Linda Reynolds and Fiona Brown, both now exonerated over allegations they acted to damage Brittany Higgins, and yet still no apology for either woman. Spare a thought too for their own colleague who had the courage to call them out, Kimberley Kitching, the late ALP senator, ostracised by her own side for daring to warn Reynolds of the coming storm. Or fellow Labor Victorian, the late Jane Garrett, who showed incredible bravery holding fast to ministerial standards that were then being debased by Daniel Andrews as laid out in last week's long-awaited IBAC report. When it comes to integrity, the left are frauds. I couldn't imagine Peter Malinauskas or Chris Minns behaving as the Prime Minister did in that low-rent podcast. I couldn't imagine Kim Beazley entertaining a question about shagging Kylie Minogue. I just can't.
Every guest gets asked these. Shag, marry, date. Kylie Minogue, Nicole Kidman or Rhonda Birchmore?
I've just got married. I'm only 6 months in.
But if it goes tits up, let's just pretend.
Oh, Kylie, clearly.
You'd marry Kylie and shag her and date her?
All of the above.
I mean, how unedifying is that? None of that now notorious podcast was broadcast live, none of it. It was all pre-recorded there. That's the sitting room at the lodge. So how did it even make its way to air? There's something off, creepy off, about Albanese's desperation to be feted by 20-somethings. Maybe it's because having once had his face on a can of beer, it's all gone to his head. Now, I don't know about this DJ Albo, but that's not who I want to see on the international stage representing my country. I mean, are we really going back to the days of Benny Hill with this bloke? Give me a daggy John Howard in a tracksuit any day. Humility will now be the biggest test for the Prime Minister. Will he have the intestinal fortitude to personally apologise to the Japanese Prime Minister and to the Australian public who know exactly what they saw on that podcast? Well, we will see. But to date, whether it's the travel rorts of his MPs or his own budget lies, Albanese's got a glass jaw. And that means he rarely admits to being wrong, even when he is. And to all those Labor women who are out on camera this week defending him, that footage is there. We'll keep it so that the next time you get on your high horse, when someone offends your gender sensibilities, well, we will use it. When you go out there and you defend the indefensible like you are now, you're surrendering your right to criticise others. Because yet again, the standard you are walking past as Labor women is the standard you accept. Now, honestly, ladies, how low will you go? Let's get the headlines out of Canberra. Political reporter Ruben Spargo.
Good evening. The Prime Minister is refusing to apologise to his Japanese counterpart over the melon controversy. Pauline Hanson is taking Anthony Albanese to task over his podcast appearance.
The way he goes about this on air, I think it's disgusting. We know what the hell he was talking about.
The Coalition has asked the Federal Police to investigate who leaked diplomatic correspondence from Japan over the incident.
Why won't the Prime Minister stop treating us like fools, man up and say sorry to the Prime Minister of Japan?
My office and my team have spent 4 years carefully rebuilding our relationships in the region.
Labor insists the podcast appearance has not damaged Australia's relationship with Japan. The Coalition is vowing to slash a long list of construction standards in a bid to lower the cost of building homes and tackle Australia's housing shortfall. It wants to cut more than 2,000 pages of building rules down to just 80. Everything beyond basic safety standards would become an optional extra, including accessibility and energy efficiency requirements.
It is illegal to build a cheap house in Australia, which is outrageous. The house won't be gold-plated, but it won't fall down.
The Coalition has confirmed it wants to cut net overseas migration to fewer than 180,000 people a year to ease pressure on housing demand.
All right, there are good signs here of improvement for the Coalition. If you have a look at the trend under Angus Taylor's leadership, the Coalition's starting to close the gap on both One Nation and the government. And there's a boost in personal support too for the opposition leader. News24 Chief Election Analyst Tom Connell has more.
Peter, the gap between the Coalition and One Nation is something we've been monitoring. It has closed again, the latest News24 pulse. Not a lot of movement in this primary vote, but One Nation down the 1 percentage point and the gap is now at 2%. So why this focus? Well, let's track this over time and look at the primary vote of what I'll call the big three. Going back to November last year, Labor then was still clearly in front at 32%. One Nation had begun to surge. Remember, 6% at the election, so it's up to 18 here, and the Coalition on 25. A summer dominated by the Bondi terror attack, we had One Nation edging ahead by January, but not a big margin, 23-19. In February, Susan Lee was replaced. By March, the coalition gap and One Nation gap is growing. It's 9 percentage points, and then the peak coming at the end of June. 13 percentage points. That's massive, but it has closed up pretty quickly. In July, it was down to 6 percentage points. Then you get to now, August, it's only 2%. The open question, we don't know the answer, has One Nation peaked after perhaps what we'd call a post-Bondi surge? The Prime Minister's personal numbers, meanwhile, they have dipped again. Satisfied is down and dissatisfied up. So down 3% overall, the minus 21% net satisfaction. That is about where Peter Dutton was before the last election, but it's still well ahead of where Susan Lee got to. Let's look at the opposition leader's net satisfaction over time as well. Beginning in February, this was when Susan Lee had her last result, minus 40% net satisfaction. So comparing those unhappy with her compared to happy, that is about as bad as it gets. There was an instant bump for Angus Taylor back up to minus 8%, and then maybe it's a honeymoon period. He got to almost neutral at minus 1. A pretty sustained slide after then, May, June, July, down to minus 16%. But in our latest poll, he's received a much-needed boost, up 5 percentage points in one poll at minus 11. Now, any leader would rather be in positive territory, but in opposition, your job is to criticise, particularly early on in a term when you're not fleshing out your own plan. So if you look at these numbers, minus 11 overall, and at the moment, heading in the right direction. He needs to get his primary vote up, but these numbers themselves, they won't be a major concern for Angus Taylor.
All right, one political observation I make there on that movement, as Tom said, there was a bit of a boost for Angus Taylor's personal ratings, and there was a bit of a slide, and then there's been a boost back again. A lot of that, in my view, has to do with when Parliament is on. And in that hiatus, when it fell away, the high point was obviously around the budget reply speech he gave in Budget Week. When it falls away, it's when the opposition's not in and around Parliament. They're not in the mix at night in the media, and they're not pumping out the content as they normally do. So this will be something that the opposition will have to watch closely. Let's get into the other issues. I've got a panel now joining me, News24 contributor Carolee Katzenbarnes and Deputy Director at the Institute of Public Affairs, Dan Wild. Welcome to you both. Carolee, I want to start with question time today. They pushed really hard on the Prime Minister, who is still refusing to apologise for the crude and sexist gestures about the Japanese Prime Minister. Have a listen.
Why won't the Prime Minister stop treating us like fools, man up and say sorry to the Prime Minister of Japan?
Can the Prime Minister assure the House that neither his office nor his department leaked official and private correspondence from the Government of Japan? The Prime Minister has now been asked 3 times why he will not apologise to the Prime Minister of Japan for his appalling behaviour on the Bush Deep podcast.
All right, we all know what we saw. I think out there in the real world, people know exactly what they saw. And this defence by the Prime Minister digging in, the defence by all these women in this front bench saying it's all been misinterpreted, I don't think this is going to help him at all. This is not when Rudd went to the Scores nightclub, the strip club in New York. This is coming after a female counterpart world leader. It's a very, very different thing, Carolee.
It shows a lack of respect to the Japanese Prime Minister, and it also shows a lot of arrogance and hubris midway through the second term. The thing is, you can't change what you don't acknowledge, and the bottom line is, if Anthony Albanese doesn't think that what he said and did is offensive, doesn't matter how many times people try and point that out, he won't accept it because there is no class to the man and he is not a leader. The interesting thing to me is Tanya Plibersek, as we know, seen as a long-term rival from the same left faction as him, she was left on, morning television having to defend him. And we know that that's a poisoned chalice, isn't it? Because he dumped her originally from education, put her in environment, then dumped her from that, put her to water, put her to social services. So he's got her right where he wants her. You've then got Katie Gallagher, the finance, who came out as well. Well, the alleged allegations before as being one of the mean girls. He's got these women trying to defend him who, in their own right, have their own issues in the public eye as well. And I just think it is incredibly rude because, as we know with the Prime Minister, he has a history of this. That tetchy press conference where he said, for the 50th time, we're not going to change, to capital gains tax or negative gearing, and he did. We've had the $275 energy bill credit. That didn't come out. We've had the falling off the stage. I stepped off the stage. We've had the promise of him going to the Northern Territory to the Garma Festival. He hasn't done that. And then poor Diddums. He hasn't had a day off in a year, so he went to take leave. I just think the fact that he's not acknowledging this shows that he has something to hide. And regardless of what he says, he seems to dine out on the eyes of the world are on Australia. Well, he needs to wake up and realise that our standing in the world, this is headlining around the world still. And the fact that he's refusing to apologise is just disgraceful, because he did say it, he did do it, the vision is there, and what can you say? He's an embarrassment to Australia.
Yeah, I'm calling him elbow sleazy, Dan. I think that's one part of the problem. The other is this ridiculous defence by these women. I mean, I would not get out there and defend the indefensible. Wouldn't matter what a Prime Minister's office wanted to threaten me with. I just wouldn't have that against my name. So, more fool them, and they are weak to do that. But I guess my biggest issue really with the whole thing is it's the trust deficit. This bloke is a pathological liar. It's now part of the narrative, Dan, about him. And this, I think, is really rich territory for the opposition heading into an election, because if you can't trust anything this bloke says, how on earth can he be re-elected?
Well, that's right. And I think also the point that you've made tonight and the other night was the hypocrisy of this all. I mean, just imagine if the shoe was on the other foot. Imagine if this was a centre-right political leader. Imagine this was Angus Taylor or Matt Canavan who made comments like this. You can imagine the reaction would be apocalyptic from the media and from Labor and from the Greens. So the hypocrisy is something that frustrates me and frustrates many Australians, in addition to the obvious gaslighting. I mean, this is what's so annoying. We are constantly told by our political leaders, don't believe your own eyes. Whether it's to do with immigration, don't believe your own eyes. Whether it's to do with living standards going backwards, don't believe your own eyes. Or whether it's to do with the actual words and the actions that the Prime Minister said and the Prime Minister performed. Everybody knows what he was gesturing. Everybody knows what he meant.
Of course they do.
Just fess up and apologise and move on. And the fact that he won't do that, for me, is the most frustrating and demeaning part of this whole episode.
I know you've watched, Dan, very closely all the numbers coming in from the ABS about migration. We've got a whole set of targets out there. Today we got one in part from the Coalition, from the housing shadow Andrew Bragg, announcing net migration targets of around 180,000 people per year on average. Have a listen.
The shortfall between number of houses built and the number of people coming in is 350 to 400,000, about that. And so you need to have a norm somewhere around 180,000 to bridge that gap over the forward estimates period. That's just the range.
OK, so the NOM slides in at that number. It's 45,000 less than Labor in the short-term forecast. And let's not forget they've never met any of their forecasts. And it's 120,000 below what we saw in the actuals last year. Dan, bit of meat on the bones here, finally from the Coalition. What do you make of it?
Well, that number's way too high. 180,000 is way too high. We've had 1.5 million over the last few years. This is not good. And I don't know why Andrew Bragg is announcing policy that doesn't have approval. I mean, I interpreted this as a direct threat, a direct challenge to Angus Taylor's leadership authority. Really, I think this is the first salvo in the next leadership spill against Angus Taylor. Why hasn't Angus Taylor clarified this? Why hasn't he slapped this down? Why isn't Andrew Bragg being sent to the back bench for this? I mean, this is insane. Who's running the party? Is Angus Taylor in charge or Andrew Bragg? I mean, Andrew Bragg himself said that this is not party policy and that no one else supports the number. So why is he putting a number out? Now, I get that he's housing shadow, and yes, there's a nexus between housing and migration, and what Andrew Bragg said about housing was spot on, about cutting the red tape, about making sure we don't gold plate and so forth. But I don't understand why these numbers are being put out there if they're not official government, not official Liberal Party policy. It seems bizarre to me. So
really, I think that Angus Taylor needs to get in control of this, because if they're going to the next election with 180,000 and with a policy of multiculturalism, I can tell you what, people are going to be taking off their blue shirts and putting orange shirts on pretty soon, because those numbers aren't going to cut it. We're not in the 1990s anymore. We're not living in the Howard era. We need a dramatic, urgent corrective action. You know, immigration is a national emergency. It's not just another policy. So I just think the Liberal Party needs to get in front of this, otherwise it's going to get away from them.
Well, I've got Angus Taylor coming up. I'll ask him pretty much all of those questions you've just put out there right now. Let's go to other issues. Work from home, of course, it's big everywhere. It's hitting housing, office accommodation. Credlin, of course, in Melbourne, we're told the equivalent of 5 MCGs will be left empty by public servants in Victoria. Money paid for them, though. The rent's paid on these buildings. And we are talking about hundreds of millions of dollars wasted on empty public service offices and desks when people aren't even there. But it's pretty bad federally too. The Department of Home Affairs, some 36% of them work from home. And in the Health Department, 61% of that workforce work 2 or 3 or more days a week it is from home. Credlin, any wonder the taxpayers are cranky?
Well, and so they should be. I mean, work flexibility, regardless of what your view may be on it, the fact that taxpayers are forking out for the Department of Home Affairs, 36%, as you said, are working from home. That's about 3 days a week. The taxpayer is forking out $115 million in the last financial year. And at the Department of Home Affairs, Home Affairs is 36%, are working from home. That's $115 million. But also at Department of Health, it's 61% working from home, and that's $54 million a year. Regardless of whether it's 10 extra dollars or 100, that is an enormous amount of money that taxpayers are just shelling out for these empty offices, and the money could be better spent in other areas as well. And it's not good. As I said, we've got in Victoria here, the Premier Ben Carroll, he has got a lot of arrogance saying he's going to pause his work from home legislation until July next year. He's not on track to win this state election in November, but all this working from home, you can't have both. You can't have the taxpayers shelling out for these empty offices when people want the work flexibility, because every taxpayer dollar spent has to be accounted for responsibly, and it's not being.
Dan, just quickly, the reform to the upper house voting ticket in Victoria, it's been a long time coming. This is a really good thing.
Yeah, look, it could be. It depends on how it plays out. I mean, I'm always a bit concerned about something that could potentially limit the ability of other parties to get into the system. We know there's a lot of frustration with the two major parties as it is. So, you know, something that can limit the ability of third parties or independents to get in, I think should be treated pretty seriously.
Yeah, mate, some of these have got they've got. Sorry, we've got a bit of a delay. It's hard to just jump in on that point. But we're talking about some really micro parties with, you know, 100 or 200 votes.
Yeah, that is true. And, you know, there is an issue with the never-ending ballot and how many people are on it. But I'd hate to think, I mean, we've got some good people in there like David Limbrick. I'd hate to think that someone like him might get rubbed out or not get re-elected because of this. So, I don't know, I'm a little bit sceptical of when the major parties support changes of this nature.
Oh, I like it. I like to see some of the rat bags sent to Coventry, but we'll agree to disagree on that one. Thank you to you both. All right, after the break, we'll get more on the opposition's plan on high migration and those comments from Anthony Elbow Sleazy not going away. We'll get to those as well. Angus Taylor coming up. Welcome back. Coming up, you won't believe how much you're set to foot out as a bailout for the Tomago smelter. Upwards of $1 billion to be announced by the Prime Minister and Chris Minns tomorrow. But now to the issue that won't go away for the Prime Minister, as calls mount for him to make a formal and personal apology to the Japanese Prime Minister following that tasteless Mellon's jibe. Here to discuss this and more, we'll get into migration, of course, too. Opposition Leader Angus Taylor. Angus, welcome to the program. I think Greg Sheridan summed it up best in his piece in The Australian today. He said it takes a special kind of high-class, refined stupidity not available to normal people for an Australian Prime Minister to choose to make crude jokes about a female Japanese Prime Minister. OK, everyone makes mistakes. Why doesn't this bloke, our Prime Minister, ever own up to a mistake and apologise when he gets something wrong?
Well, you're absolutely right, Peter. This was completely tasteless. It was beneath the office of Prime Minister to make these comments. Well, you're right. People make mistakes. But 4 times in question time in the last 2 days, we've offered him the opportunity to apologise to the Japanese Prime Minister. 4 times he's chosen not to. Now, Peter, this was the Prime Minister who said before becoming Prime Minister, when he made a mistake, he would fess up. He said that straight. He's never done it. I've never heard him do it, Peter. He certainly hasn't done it in this instance. And this is a serious situation because our relationship with Japan, of course, is incredibly important at a more dangerous time in the Asia-Pacific than any time since the Second World War. And yet he's putting that relationship at risk in behaving this way. This is a guy who can't lie straight in bed at night and can't be honest with the Australian people, but he also can't apologise when he makes a clear error.
We had some serious questions a little while ago about the ISIS brides and about the Islamic State men, the Australian men, the 13 of them in the prison in Iraq. The Prime Minister went to ground. I can't remember the last time he gave a serious economic speech, but he can find time for these podcasters. That wasn't even live. I mean, he could have declined to answer those questions about Kylie Minogue. He could have sat on his hands and you know, not done the melon thing, whatever. But even if it had been put in the can, he could have not let it run. Like, he chose to put himself on these platforms. Why can't we get a serious Prime Minister in these really serious times?
Well, you're right, Peta. I mean, Australians are hurting. You hear it all the time. I hear it all the time. I've been out over the last 5 weeks or so during what's called the winter recess. I've spoken to around 1,200 businesses. I've spoken to thousands of Australians, and I see anger, I see grief, I see frustration. I see businesses failing at 30 a day, family businesses, small businesses where the hopes are going up in smoke, families who can't make ends meet, they can't pay their power bills, they can't pay the mortgage, and yet this Prime Minister is carrying on in the way he does. He can't be straight to the Australian people. He lied 50 times, in his own words, about negative gearing and capital gains tax, and now he can't fess up when he's made a very clear error. And just listening to him in question time, I mean, it's a hard place to be sitting in the opposition having to listen to this stuff. But the complete unwillingness, time and time and time again, to do what is very obvious, he just has to say sorry. He just has to say sorry.
I'll come to migration in a moment, but I listened to Question Time today and you've really gone on the attack about the government's decision to cut support for people over the age of 65 to hang on to their private health insurance. It's been repeatedly raised with me on the program. I have raised it here. I've got a huge response from viewers. People say to me, I am down to 2 meals a day. I'm cutting back on everything I can. The last thing I want to give up, and I'm on a modest income, they say, the last thing I want to give up is my private health insurance. It won't hurt the rich, Angus. This is going to hurt people, Labor people, on modest incomes. Why is the government going after seniors like this?
Well, because when Labor runs out of money, they come after yours. This is a government that is prepared to give welfare and home deposit support for non-citizens, and yet it's slashing support for private health insurance for Australians over the age of 65. And the facts are important here, Peter. This will be a $1,600 hit to a typical older Australian over the age of 65. The ones who'll cop it the most are those over the age of 70. And this is at a time, of course, in your life when you really rely on good health insurance and good health services. What we will see, and we expect, we've seen modelling to say that 40% of people will drop their coverage, and that means they will go into queues and wait lists in the public system and put more pressure on that public system. Increase the wait lists, increase ambulance ramping, put more pressure on the public system, which ultimately will have to be paid for by us as state taxpayers. So frankly, this is bad policy. It's bad for older Australians, and it is made necessary because Labor can't control its spending.
Let's go to housing. We know a big part of that obviously is migration. Your housing spokesman, Andrew Bragg, was out there today outlining a range for a migration target. He said around the range of 180,000 a year. He did say it wasn't finalised policy. He did say some don't agree with it. You're the boss. What's the official answer from the coalition?
Well, the official answer is we've got housing in freefall in this country right now. We've seen a collapse in the housing market in confidence because of Labor's toxic taxes they've introduced in the budget. And we will cap migration based on housing supply. Now, I am deeply fearful that we're going to see a freefall in the number of houses being built in this country, a collapse in the number of houses built in this country. It's already low. It's down at around 170,000 a year, well below where it was when we were in government, Peta. But I think there's a real prospect that it's going to go far lower than that. Migration must be capped based on the number of houses we've got in this country. That's the mistake.
I know, Angus, but you've got to have a number.
They've let far more people in. Well, and the number will be based on the number of houses we get built over. We know that. And I can tell you this, Peter, and I've said this to you before. It will be well below 180,000. It will be a number that will be real. I tell you, Labor's targets, they've never met them. They've always come over.
No, I know that.
Our other adversary, One Nation, they don't know the difference between total migration and permanent migration, so no one knows what their number is. The number will be right. It will be capped based on the number of houses available. It will be well below 200,000. I fear it will have to be substantially below that because of the collapse we're seeing in housing supply and housing construction in this country right now.
OK, at the top of the show I showed how the trend has been improving for you ever since the move away from Susan Lee. And I have said here repeatedly, Angus, that you are mopping up a mess that began under Angus Taylor a decade ago, right? So you've made some inroads. But one of the things that killed Susan Lee, Peter Dutton, to be fair, Scott Morrison as well, was policy inertia. Like, we need to have more detail out there to debate and to work through so we can see the colour of your money. That Australians know with confidence that if they vote for you, they are going to get change. When is it going to happen?
Well, Peter, you can all read our plan, which has still got more to do, but it's already out there. There's a lot in this that I laid out through the course of the budget and reply, and then we published this just about 4 weeks ago. And our plan is to axe Labor's toxic taxes and to bring down income taxes, to get rid of the red tape that's making it too hard to build houses, to run businesses in this country, scrap net zero, and make sure we use our natural resources in this country to get energy costs down, get rid of those energy taxes that are being built into the economy everywhere you go, in vehicles, in industry, in the electricity grid, cap migration based on our housing supply, but get our housing supply up. And we've laid out policies here to do that, putting Australians first too, Peter, and that means that welfare programs, 17 different welfare programs, should be restricted to Australian citizens. The NDIS should be restricted to Australian citizens, and we have to make sure that our warfighters, our Defence Force, is properly funded in this country. Now, that and many other policies are already laid out. We know there's more to do as well, Peter, but that is, as you know, at this stage of the election cycle, a serious plan with a serious team to deliver that plan. And I encourage your viewers to have a read of this plan. You can find it online.
They're all over it, Angus, I promise you. They are all over it. You are a good man, but I think a few of your shadows need a toe up the backside to get them moving. I'll leave it there. Thank you. All right. Well, have a look at the de-radicalisation programs. They were raised in the Royal Commission. A lot of people concerned that there are no audits going on. You don't know much about the efficacy of these programs. The panel up next. Welcome back. More flags tomorrow night. I hope you noticed there behind Angus Taylor there were 2 flags, but 2 Australian national flags. I might add, I said 2. The problems go back 10 years, beyond actually, back to the time of Malcolm Turnbull. I think I might have said Angus Taylor. I meant Malcolm Turnbull. That's where the rot started for the coalition. Now to other issues, though. The increasing concerns being aired in the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism and the massacre at Bondi regarding Australian de-radicalisation programs. Claims that the schemes are flawed and have created a false sense of security. I've been saying that for a long time. Finally now that's in evidence at the Royal Commission. Joining me now on my panel, Senior Fellow at the Menzies Research Centre, Nick Peta, and Liberal MP, the barnstorming Phil Thompson. Well, reports out of the Royal Commission, as I say, reports that one of the programs in particular discussed in evidence has not even been reviewed in 6 years. Now, Nick, we are spending some $140 billion on these programs. We've got some 300 would-be terrorists in them. How on earth are we not auditing them?
Well, unfortunately, Peter, I think the history of terrorism is that the measures to combat terrorism are often reactive. You know, the measures that we brought in after 9/11, even before that, after the Lockerbie disaster, which highlighted those problems with aircraft security, and we've done it again, right? But I think this Bondi experience and what's being exposed at the Royal Commission and being exposed elsewhere shows that we've got to wake up very, very quickly to this problem of radicalisation. We're not dealing with it. We've become complacent. And yet the threat grows day by day as the number of people on that radical list grows. We've got to wake up to it. I just hope that this government can rise above its performance elsewhere, let's say, and actually get serious about this, because there's no more important duty of any government than to protect its people.
It's interesting, Phil, you know, ASIO's been handed special powers, secret powers, to investigate universities who have research ties with hostile nations. Now, I'd want to hope they're getting resources as well as just laws. And I also want to see, as I just discussed there, some audits of these DRAD programs. I am not convinced they will keep us safe.
Well, even with the de-radicalisation programs, we know that not all of them are mandatory, which I think can be a massive problem. I want to know exactly how many people have gone through and what's actually happened, where these people are located, these de-radicalisation training or what they go through. Do they work? We're not looking at it. 6 years is far too long.
No.
On the university side, we've got... In what world does a university think it's appropriate to do business or operate with foreign agencies or foreign governments and do research or have drone kind of researchers doing stuff for foreign governments or to foreign bodies? Like, that's crazy. Like, I can't believe that was even occurring, let alone the need for ASIO to be able to make sure, not just have the powers to monitor or look at, but actually stop. And I also want to make sure that what ASIO is doing, they have to come back and report to, say, the Intelligence Committee on exactly what's going on. The day for no more scrutiny is over. We need to be making sure that there is oversight for everyone.
Let's go to the Tomago announcement due tomorrow. The PM and the New South Wales Premier will spend $1 billion of taxpayer money. They'll hand it across to Rio Tinto to keep the smelter operating. Now, the only reason, Nick, they're doing this is because we've gone down the path of renewables so hard and so fast that we're sending industry in this country up against the wall, often overseas. We can't afford to lose this smelter. They can't make ends meet because of the cost of our energy now, so we're bailing them out.
Yeah, this is carbon tax by stealth, isn't it, Peter? This is a cost of $1 billion, reportedly, that every taxpayer in this country is going to have to contribute towards, or it goes on the debt for future taxpayers to share the burden, just because of this crazy, nonsensical, ludicrous, engineeringly ignorant energy plan that this government has introduced. We're all paying the cost for that. And no doubt there'll be some triumphant press conference tomorrow. How wonderful they've done to bail out Tomago. You shouldn't have to bail out Tomago if the fundamentals are right.
Let's go back to those reports. I spoke about them on Monday and Tuesday. They're in the Australian, if I can, Phil. Reference the $500,000 spent on primarily three Muslim-related entities, media entities, paid for, as I say, by Canberra. And these outlets have been accused of promoting extremist voices, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, pro-terrorist content. Some of them have lauded Hezbollah killers and other things. Now, why on earth is this happening?
It shouldn't be happening. The government has failed. There should be no money going to any group, especially media outlets that promote terrorist activity. They should be stripped of funding, stripped of the ability to even operate within Australia. But this is a classic Labor government, what they do. They take their eye off the ball. It's really shameful that this is occurring in our nation, and these groups should be fined, not given money.
And we're cutting the support for pensioners to keep their, or not just pensioners, anyone over the age of 65 to keep the private health insurance, if you can believe it. Nick Catterfield, Thompson, thank you to you both. All right, quick break. After the break, the wonderful Kel. He's wonderful, isn't he? And he joins me on Wednesday, wordsmith and broadcaster Kel Richards. Question without notice on this one before we get into some of the words from viewers, Kel. Census. We've had a census this week. Is the plural census, censuses, censi? I'm intrigued.
OK. No, we pluralise it the way we normally pluralise English words. It's censuses. I know that's awkward because it's all those sibilant sounds together, but our Latin plurals are wrong in English. Don't use Latin plurals in English. We're speaking English, and even if it's a bit awkward, it's censuses.
Censuses, there we go. I've learned something. Hey, Brendan wants to know the origins for the phrase Skid Row.
Well, this is interesting. Brendan suggests it might be connected with Skid Road, R-O-A-D, which happened in timber-growing areas, and it did. Every timber-growing area had a skid road, a mud road that logs that had been felled would drag down, and often the poor workers lived in huts beside the skid road, and that may have played a part in it. But the linguists tell me the most likely source of this is that people who lived on Skid Row, the poorest part of any town, they were on the skids. That is, their life was going down. It was not on the up. That's probably the main source of the expression.
All right, I do like this next one coming up. Warren, like Peter Credlin, wants to understand where we got higgledy-piggledy from.
Actually, a long time ago. It's about 500 years old. And the Oxford says it's what's called a rhyming reduplication. We got lots of these sort of rhyming reduplications, hanky-panky, and lots of them. And the English language likes them. And then the Oxford says of obscure origin, but they make the suggestion that it might have been what they call a vocal gesture. And by that they mean a word in which the sounds are trying to suggest what they're naming. And higgledy-piggledy gets fairly good at doing that, doesn't it?
It does. What about beyond the pale? Belinda says, where's that one come from?
OK, originally the word pale meant a wooden stake driven in the ground, and a row of those wooden stakes in the ground made a wooden fence. We get our word pole from the same source, the same ancient Latin word. So pale, pole, that sort of thing. And the idea of that sort of wooden fences is where we get our paling fences from. Now, in the medieval era, around medieval towns, there was a demarcation which was called the pale, beyond which the law of the town did not run. So it was the limits of civilization. So if you are beyond the pale, if your behaviour is unacceptable, you have passed the limits of civilization.
Well, I think the Prime Minister might have got there close on his melon stuff.
Oh, no,
Very appropriate
He's on the other side.
This week.
He's on the other side.
We'll be talking about that next week. We'll come back to that. What sexism and misogyny, what's the difference? We'll do that next week. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Kel. That's it from me. See you tomorrow night. Here's Andrew.